Hello, beautiful Pisces, and welcome. I'm really grateful that you're here today. Before we begin, just take a slow breath with me. Let yourself settle into this moment. If this reading finds you at exactly the right time, trust whatever resonates with your heart and simply leave the rest behind. Okay, as I connect with your energy, I already feel something very emotional rising to the surface. It doesn't feel loud. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like someone has been carrying words inside their heart for far too long, and those words are becoming impossible to keep hidden. The first card I see is the King of Swords, and it's interesting because this person may have appeared so composed, so controlled, almost as if nothing could ever shake them. They may have convinced themselves that staying quiet was the safest choice. Maybe they believed that if they never revealed how deeply they cared, they would never have to face rejection, disappointment, or vulnerability. But Pisces, I don't think that strategy is working anymore. It feels like every day they stay silent, the weight inside them grows a little heavier. Then the Knight of Cups steps into the reading, and everything begins to soften. I feel like this is the version of them they've been trying to hide. Beneath all that careful thinking is someone whose heart has been quietly calling your name. It seems like they've imagined countless conversations with you. They've pictured reaching out. They've replayed old memories, wondering how things could have unfolded differently if they had simply been honest from the beginning. I keep feeling like they didn't expect you to become this important. Maybe they thought this connection would simply pass through their life, like so many others. Maybe they believed time would weaken these feelings, but instead, something completely different happened. The more distance appeared, the clearer their heart became. The silence that was supposed to protect them slowly became the very thing that started hurting them. The Seven of Cups brings in another layer that feels incredibly personal. I don't see someone who is confused about whether they love you. I feel like they're overwhelmed by everything that love asks of them. Loving you would mean opening doors they've kept locked for years. It would mean facing fears they thought they had buried. It would mean allowing someone to see the parts of themselves they've always tried to protect. Yeah, that's a frightening place for someone who has spent so much of their life pretending to have everything under control. Pisces, your energy feels incredibly gentle here. Without even trying, you may have shown this person what emotional safety feels like. That's why they can't seem to forget you. It isn't only attraction. It isn't only chemistry. It's something much quieter. Something that keeps following them when they're driving home at night, sitting alone with their thoughts, or waking up before sunrise wondering why your face is the first thing that comes into their mind. Oh my God! The energy shifts as the world appears. This card makes me feel like they're reaching a point where pretending is simply no longer possible. Something inside them is closing one chapter while another quietly waits to begin. I don't necessarily feel that everything changes overnight. It feels much more human than that. It feels like someone slowly realizing they've run out of excuses. Every reason they once used to stay distant is starting to lose its power. They may even find themselves looking at your pictures, reading old conversations, or remembering tiny moments that didn't seem important at the time but suddenly mean everything now. It's almost as if their heart has been collecting little pieces of you without asking for permission. What touches me the most is the feeling underneath all of these cards. It isn't pride anymore. It isn't resistance. I feel something much softer, something almost fragile. This energy suggests they're beginning to ask themselves a question they never wanted to face before. What if staying silent becomes the reason they lose the person they never truly wanted to lose? That thought seems to linger around them more often now. It may arrive unexpectedly in the middle of an ordinary day, and once it appears, it's difficult for them to push it away again. I feel like this realization is changing them little by little. Maybe they aren't ready to say every word that's living inside their heart just yet, but something important has already begun. Their heart seems to be speaking much louder than their fear, and for the first time in a long while, those quiet feelings no longer want to remain hidden. The Three of Swords is lying here so quietly that it almost feels like it doesn't want to be noticed. I don't feel like this pain arrived all at once. It seems to have settled in over time, little by little, through moments that probably looked ordinary on the outside. Maybe they smiled when people asked if everything was fine. Maybe they kept themselves busy. Maybe they convinced themselves they had already moved on. But every time the world became quiet again, your absence was waiting for them. I keep seeing someone remembering things they once overlooked. A conversation that ended too quickly. A goodbye that felt unfinished. The way you looked at them when you hoped they would finally open their heart. Those memories don't seem to leave them alone anymore. It's almost like their own heart has become a place they can no longer escape from. The Wheel of Fortune enters the reading, and something feels different. Not dramatic, just deeply reflective. I feel like life has a way of bringing us back to the lessons we tried to avoid. This person may be realizing that some opportunities don't disappear because fate was unfair. Sometimes they slip away because fear speaks louder than love. That realization doesn't seem easy for them to carry. Yeah, I almost hear them asking themselves questions that have no simple answers. What if I had called that day? What if I had stayed instead of walking away? What if I had trusted what I felt instead of pretending I didn't? Those questions seem to arrive without warning, usually during the quietest moments. Driving home after work, sitting alone with a cup of coffee that's gone cold, looking out a window while everyone else keeps moving through their day. It feels like regret has found its own language inside them. Pisces, I don't think they're only missing the relationship, they're missing the version of themselves that existed when you were around. You may have brought out a softness they rarely showed anyone else. You may have made ordinary days feel lighter without even realizing it. It's strange how we sometimes don't recognize the value of peace until it becomes a memory. The Six of Cups appears, and oh my God, this energy feels incredibly tender. I don't see them forcing memories to come back. The memories seem to choose them instead. A familiar song, a place you once visited together, the scent of someone's perfume passing by. Even something as simple as seeing your favorite color could suddenly stop them in their tracks. Those little moments seem to whisper your name before they even realize what's happening. There may be nights when they find themselves smiling for a second before the smile quietly fades because they remember that you're no longer beside them. It's such a human feeling. I don't sense someone trying to erase the past anymore. It looks like they're finally allowing themselves to appreciate what those memories truly meant. Okay, this part feels important. I don't believe they're only thinking about what they lost. They seem to be looking honestly at the ways they may have contributed to that loss. That isn't an easy place for anyone to stand. Pride usually tells us to protect ourselves. But this energy suggests something much more vulnerable. They're beginning to recognize moments when they stayed silent instead of speaking. Moments when they hesitated instead of choosing love. Moments when they expected you to understand feelings they never actually expressed. Sometimes, people don't realize the value of patience until they remember someone who waited for them far longer than they deserved. The Fool arrives so gently that it almost feels like hope stepping into the room without making a sound. I don't see recklessness here. I feel the quiet beginning of courage. The kind that doesn't erase the past, but still wonders whether the future might hold another chance. They may not know exactly how to fix everything. Honestly, they may not even believe they deserve forgiveness yet. But there seems to be a small part of their heart that refuses to stop believing that healing is still possible. I keep hearing the words, "If only I could sit across from you one more time." Not to defend themselves, not to explain everything away, simply to be honest, simply to tell you that waiting on the other side of silence taught them lessons they never expected to learn. It seems like they would trade every excuse they ever made for one genuine conversation where nothing is hidden anymore. Whether that moment arrives soon or takes a little more time, this energy feels like someone carrying a sincere wish to make different choices if life ever places your paths together again. The Hermit feels incredibly present here, Pisces. It doesn't come across as loneliness for the sake of being alone. It feels more like someone who has finally stopped running long enough to hear their own heart. I keep sensing long evenings where there isn't much noise around them. Their phone is quiet. The television is playing in the background without really holding their attention. Their thoughts keep wandering back to the same place, and somehow that place always seems to lead back to you. I feel like this season has changed them in ways they never expected. There may have been a time when they believed avoiding difficult emotions made them stronger. They may have convinced themselves that staying detached was a form of protection. But it seems like life has slowly shown them something different. Real strength doesn't always look like holding everything inside. Sometimes it looks like admitting that you've been hurting for much longer than anyone realized. Okay, I almost hear them whispering an apology they haven't spoken out loud yet. Not because they suddenly found the perfect words, but because they finally understand the silence they created. They may be looking back and recognizing that every moment they pulled away wasn't really about you. It seems much more connected to old fears they carried long before the two of you crossed paths. Fear of disappointment, fear of not being enough, fear that loving someone this deeply would eventually leave them broken. The Lovers appears, and the atmosphere becomes surprisingly gentle. This doesn't feel rushed, it feels sincere. I don't get the impression that they're weighing one person against another. I feel like they're standing between the person they used to be and the person they're slowly becoming. Every honest realization seems to move them one step closer to choosing love over fear, even if that journey still feels unfamiliar to them. Yeah, people sometimes imagine healing as one big breakthrough, but this energy feels much quieter than that. It's waking up one morning and deciding not to hide from your emotions anymore. It's realizing that vulnerability doesn't always lead to loss. It's understanding that someone who truly cared wasn't asking for perfection. They were simply hoping for honesty. The Page of Wands catches my attention because I keep feeling little sparks of courage beginning to appear. They may have opened your conversation more than once, without typing anything. They may have started writing a message only to erase every word before pressing send. I almost see them staring at their phone, wondering whether enough time has passed, wondering whether you would even want to hear from them after everything that happened. Oh my God, there's so much hesitation wrapped around such a simple desire. It doesn't seem like they want a grand speech. I feel like what they really want is one small opening, one conversation, one chance to ask how you've been, one opportunity to hear your voice again without all the walls standing between you. The Page of Swords brings another layer into the reading that feels almost bittersweet. I wouldn't be surprised if they've quietly kept up with your life from a distance. Maybe they've noticed a new picture. Maybe they've wondered where you were when they saw you smiling. Maybe they've caught themselves hoping that the happiness on your face wasn't because someone else had already taken the place they wish they had never left. I also feel like they've been trying to understand you in ways they never did before. It's almost as though distance has given them perspective. They may be replaying conversations that once seemed ordinary, only to realize you had been telling them exactly what you needed all along. They simply weren't ready to hear it. Pisces, I keep sensing a sentence that refuses to leave their heart. I'm sorry I made you wait. Not because someone forced them to say it, not because guilt alone is speaking. It feels like an honest acknowledgement that your patience carried more love than they understood at the time. They may finally realize that waiting asks a great deal from the person who believes in the connection, and perhaps they underestimated how much strength that required from you. This energy doesn't promise that every obstacle disappears overnight. It simply feels like someone becoming more truthful with themselves than they've ever been before. That truth seems to be opening doors inside them that have remained locked for years. Little by little, they're beginning to imagine what it would feel like to stop hiding behind fear and simply walk toward the person whose presence has continued to live quietly in their heart. The Ace of Pentacles feels remarkably peaceful as it settles into this reading. Pisces, this doesn't come across as someone chasing excitement anymore. It feels like someone who's finally beginning to understand the difference between a passing emotion and something that could truly last. I keep sensing that they've stopped searching outside themselves for answers because every road they explored somehow brought them back to the same realization. Your place in their heart never really changed. There may have been moments when they convinced themselves they could simply move forward. They may have tried to focus on work, on responsibilities, on everything that looked practical from the outside. But it seems like every new beginning they imagined felt incomplete without you standing somewhere inside it. It's almost as though they reached a point where they had to ask themselves a difficult question. If I'm building a future, who do I actually want to share it with? The answer doesn't seem rushed anymore. It feels settled. Okay, that's a very different energy from where this journey first began. I don't feel someone fighting their emotions. I feel someone accepting them. The Ten of Pentacles appears, and I can't help smiling because this energy feels incredibly warm. I don't immediately think about grand gestures or dramatic reunions. I see something much simpler. I see quiet mornings, cooking dinner together after a long day, laughing over little things that nobody else would understand. I see someone imagining a life that isn't built on uncertainty, but on consistency, trust, and choosing each other over and over again. This person may have realized that love isn't only about intense chemistry or unforgettable moments. It may also be about finding someone who feels like home after the world has exhausted you. Pisces, your energy seems to represent that kind of peace for them. A place where they don't have to perform, a place where they can finally put down the emotional armor they've been carrying for so long. Yeah, I think that's what surprises them the most. For someone who once believed vulnerability was dangerous, your presence somehow makes honesty feel possible. The Three of Wands stretches across the reading like a quiet horizon. I feel like they're beginning to picture time differently. Instead of wondering what could go wrong, they may be asking themselves what could actually go right if they stopped letting fear make every decision. Their imagination seems to be shifting away from worst-case scenarios toward possibilities they once refused to consider. I keep seeing them thinking about future conversations with you. Maybe they're imagining taking a walk together without awkward silence. Maybe they're wondering what it would feel like to hear you laugh again. They may even be picturing introducing you to important people in their life, not because they need anyone's approval, but because they want the people they love to finally meet the person who has quietly transformed their heart. Oh my God, there's something beautifully sincere about this energy. It doesn't feel possessive. It doesn't feel desperate. It feels intentional. The King of Cups arrives almost like someone taking a deep breath before speaking from the heart. This person seems far more emotionally available than they once were. That doesn't necessarily mean every fear has disappeared. I feel like some insecurities may still visit them from time to time. But those fears no longer seem to be sitting in the driver's seat. Their heart appears to have found a stronger voice than their doubts. Pisces, I also feel like they've been thinking about what commitment actually means. Not as a promise made in a perfect moment, but as a choice people continue making when life becomes complicated. That perspective seems much more mature than before. It looks like they've stopped asking whether love is risky and started asking whether life without this connection would leave a much deeper regret. I keep hearing an unspoken promise forming inside them. I don't want to keep running. I don't want to keep wondering. I don't want another version of my future where I spend years asking what might have happened if I had simply chosen love. Those words may never have reached you yet, but they seem very real inside this person's heart. The beautiful thing about these cards is that they don't feel driven by fantasy alone. They feel grounded. It seems like they're beginning to understand that meaningful relationships aren't built through perfect timing or flawless people. They're built when two hearts become willing to meet each other with honesty, patience, and courage. Your connection appears to be teaching them exactly that. Little by little, they seem ready to stop treating love like something to fear and start treating it like the place they've quietly wanted to return to all along. Strength appears so gently here, Pisces, that it almost feels like someone taking their first full breath after carrying invisible weight for far too long. I don't sense dramatic change happening overnight. It seems much quieter than that. I feel like this person has started noticing parts of themselves they used to ignore. The fears they buried, the reactions they never questioned, the walls they believed were protecting them when, in reality, those walls were keeping love outside. I keep seeing moments where they're simply sitting with their own thoughts instead of trying to escape them. Maybe they're taking longer walks than usual. Maybe they're spending less time distracting themselves. Maybe they're beginning to understand that healing isn't about pretending the pain never existed. It's about looking directly at it without immediately turning away. There seems to be a growing awareness that some of the choices they made weren't really about this connection at all. They may have been carrying wounds from years ago, wounds that quietly shaped the way they responded whenever love became real. Sometimes old pain teaches people to expect loss before happiness even has a chance to arrive. This energy feels like someone slowly unlearning that lesson. Okay, that's where temperance steps into the reading, and everything begins to soften. I don't feel pressure here. I don't feel urgency. I feel balance returning little by little. It looks like they're learning that healing doesn't happen by forcing themselves to become someone completely different. Instead, they're allowing the broken pieces inside them to finally exist without shame. They may be discovering that vulnerability isn't weakness. It may actually be the place where genuine love begins. Pisces, I also feel like your energy has quietly inspired this transformation without you even realizing it. Sometimes we meet people who challenge us simply by loving us differently than we've ever been loved before. Your kindness may have reflected parts of themselves they weren't ready to face. Your patience may have shown them how much fear had been controlling their decisions. Those realizations don't always happen immediately, but once they begin, they tend to change everything. Oh my God! The tower arrives, and for a moment everything becomes incredibly honest. This doesn't feel like destruction for the sake of destruction. It seems more like the moment when pretending finally becomes too exhausting to continue. I almost see the mask slipping away piece by piece. The version of themselves that always said, "I'm fine," even when they weren't. The version that acted distant whenever emotions became too intense. The version that believed staying guarded was the safest way to survive. That version seems to be falling apart. Honestly, I feel like they're allowing it to happen. There may have been days when this process felt overwhelming. They may have questioned why so many emotions suddenly appeared all at once. Maybe memories they thought they had forgotten came rushing back. Maybe they cried unexpectedly over things they thought they had already accepted. It seems like every emotion they once pushed into the background has been patiently waiting for the chance to finally be felt. Yeah, healing can be messy before it becomes peaceful. The Six of Swords carries a completely different atmosphere. It feels lighter somehow. Not because every wound has disappeared, but because they no longer want to live inside those wounds forever. I feel like they're beginning to walk away from old beliefs that never truly belonged to them. Beliefs that said love always ends in disappointment. Beliefs that told them they had to hide their emotions to stay safe. Beliefs that convinced them they had to handle everything alone. Pisces, one message keeps repeating itself very clearly. I want to become someone who can love you the way you deserve. That sentence doesn't seem to come from guilt. It feels like it comes from growth. This person may be realizing that returning without changing would only recreate the same painful cycle. They don't seem interested in repeating old patterns anymore. They appear much more focused on becoming emotionally present, emotionally honest, and emotionally available. I also feel like they're starting to forgive themselves, and that's an important part of this journey. People often struggle to offer healthy love when they're still carrying constant shame inside their own heart. It looks like they're learning that acknowledging mistakes isn't the same as being defined by them. Every lesson they've faced seems to be shaping someone who understands the value of sincerity much more deeply than before. This energy doesn't feel like someone trying to become perfect. It feels like someone becoming real. They seem ready to leave behind the version of themselves that lived in fear and continue walking toward a future where love no longer has to compete with the walls they once believed they needed to survive. The King of Cups settles into this reading with a warmth that feels almost impossible to ignore. Pisces, I don't sense someone who wants to hide behind silence anymore. It seems like they've reached a place where keeping everything inside has become far more painful than speaking the truth. I keep seeing them rehearsing a conversation in their mind, not because they want everything to sound perfect, but because they don't want to waste another opportunity by leaving the most important words unsaid. I feel like there's one sentence that keeps returning to them over and over again. I'm sorry. Not the kind of apology that tries to erase the past. Not the kind that asks you to pretend nothing ever happened. This feels much more sincere. It seems like they want you to know they finally understand the weight of everything you carried while they were still trying to figure themselves out. They may realize that your patience wasn't something they should have assumed would last forever. Yeah, sometimes people don't recognize the value of someone's presence until they imagine a future where that person is no longer there. The King of Cups feels emotionally steady. That's what stands out to me the most. I don't feel the same hesitation that surrounded this connection before. There may still be nervousness, there may still be uncertainty about how you'll respond, but I don't feel them questioning what their heart wants anymore. That part seems remarkably clear. The Three of Pentacles appears, and the energy becomes beautifully practical. Instead of dreaming about what love could be, they seem ready to ask themselves how love can actually be nurtured. I don't get the impression that they're expecting everything to magically fall into place. It feels like they're becoming willing to put in the effort, to listen more carefully, to communicate more honestly, and to rebuild trust one conversation at a time. Okay, that feels important, because genuine healing usually grows through small moments rather than dramatic promises. I almost see them imagining ordinary days with you again, sitting across from each other with coffee between you, laughing over something completely unexpected, sharing the little details of your day that once seemed insignificant but suddenly become precious when you've spent enough time apart. Those simple moments appear to matter just as much as the big romantic ones. The Four of Wands carries an incredibly comforting feeling. Pisces, this card makes me feel like they're beginning to understand what home truly means. Home doesn't always have four walls. Sometimes home is simply the person who makes your heart finally exhale. It seems like that's what your energy has become for them. A place where they no longer feel the need to defend themselves. A place where they can simply exist as they are. Oh my God! I almost feel them wondering whether you'll still recognize the person they've become. People change quietly. Healing often happens without anyone watching. They may hope that if life gives both of you another chance, you'll notice the difference not because they tell you they've changed, but because you'll feel it in the way they listen, the way they speak, and the way they choose to stay present instead of disappearing when emotions become difficult. The sun rises across the reading so gently that it almost feels like the first morning after a very long storm. I don't interpret this as perfection. Life rarely works that way. Instead, it feels like hope returning after uncertainty has lasted longer than either of you expected. This energy suggests that joy is becoming possible again, not because the past is forgotten, but because the lessons from the past have created room for something healthier to grow. July carries an especially meaningful atmosphere around these cards. I don't necessarily see it as a month where every answer suddenly arrives. I feel it more as a doorway. A season where hearts become a little more open, a season where conversations that once felt impossible may begin to feel within reach, a season where two people could discover that love looks very different after both have spent time growing in their own separate ways. Pisces, the strongest feeling I leave this reading with isn't urgency, it isn't fear, it's quiet hope. It seems like this person no longer wants love to remain something they only think about in silence. They want the chance to express it, to protect it, and to treat it with the honesty it has always deserved. If this connection truly resonates with your heart, allow yourself to trust your own intuition above everything else. Your inner knowing has always been one of your greatest gifts. Let it guide you gently, one step at a time, wherever this journey is meant to lead. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today, Pisces. You mean more than you know, and I truly appreciate every moment we share together. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you again in the next reading. Bye for now.